the most important thing I learned in college wasn't anything I learned in class. It was how I learned to study. Because while everyone else spent hours studying while checking Facebook and going on their phones, I would get in the zone. You see, in the book Flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about the psychology of optimal experience. He talks about the state of being fully engaged in what you're doing, where you feel like you lose sense of time and where the work you do feels effortless. And he calls this the flow state. Other people sometimes call it getting in the zone. But can you see how being in that state would exponentially increase your productivity? The problem is most of us rarely experience it, and if we do, it's by accident. But assuming you are working on something that excites you, like we talked about earlier, the biggest key to getting in this state is working in chunks of uninterrupted time. That means picking one and only one thing to work on, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, which I do, or turning it off, and working for a predefined amount of time, giving it all your mental power with zero interruptions and zero multitasking. This one simple thing is the biggest game changer for productivity. Peter Drucker, who's the most famous management thinker ever, recommended working in chunks of 2 hours at a time or more, but you don't have to go to that extreme. What is important, though, is that you do work in chunks of uninterrupted time. I personally work in chunks of either 50 minutes at a time or 90 minutes at a time, but let's just keep this simple. So first of all, buy an electronic timer. You want to start working by the clock. And if you use your phone as a timer, that's not an option because that would just be a distraction. You'll check your phone, you'll see, oh, I have this text, let me respond, and so on. So you don't want to do that. Next, decide a predetermined amount of time that you're going to work in. You can do 50 minutes with 10-minute breaks. You can do 90 minutes with 20 or 30-minute breaks or something else. For now, let's just start with 45 minutes straight and with 15-minute breaks just to get started. You can then change this amount of time at any point for however long makes sense for you, but I'd rather start with less time straight since most people usually interrupt themselves about every 3 minutes when they work. And by the way, there was a study that showed it takes over 23 minutes to get back in the zone after an interruption, assuming you were in the zone in the first place. So that really goes to show how important it is to really get in the zone and stay in the zone, not interrupting yourself and not letting anybody else interrupt you as well. You really need to defend this time and cut off all possible distractions, namely email, phone, or anybody who could potentially interrupt you. So when you start working for the day, commit to working by the timer. Put 45 minutes on the timer and work for 45 minutes straight. And then when that's done, put the timer for 15 minutes and take a 15-minute break. When you work, you should work on things, by the way, that will pay you a return in your work life. But what about during your breaks? You see, most people, their idea of a break is let me go on Facebook or do something that pays no return, but you really want your breaks to be high quality. You can even go so far to say that the quality of your work is determined by the quality of your break, because unless you feel refreshed and enthusiastic, you're not going to be able to give it your all when you work. So if you invest this break time in things that make you feel refreshed, and more importantly, even maybe investing this time to again become the person you can be, like Hal Elrod talked about, you're making the best use of this time. So maybe for one of these breaks, for example, you meditate. Maybe for another, you go for a walk. We'll talk about organizing all your breaks and work time and so forth a little bit later, but the real takeaway I want you to get is this. Most people are extremely unproductive because they don't go full force with their work, and then they don't go full force with their breaks either. When they're working, they're sneaking in interruptions and breaks, and when they're taking a break, they're thinking about work. And the result is they can't think straight, they don't have the energy they need to do their best, and they don't get that much done. But by oscillating between a give it your all, get in the zone, uninterrupted chunk of time, and then a give it your all, feel completely refreshed break. You'll feel more clear. You'll get in the flow state. And if you work for even half the time that you did before, you'll get more done. Because ultimately, you see people talk about, oh, I worked 10 hours or 12 hours or all these long days, but it doesn't matter how long you work for. Hours worked isn't the measure for productivity. The real measure is how much you've gotten done regardless of how long it takes. So decide how long you want to work in, get an electronic timer, and make sure you start doing this and see what a huge difference it makes.